Hello everyone, my name is Jason Nia, and this is my midterm project for CIS3367 with Professor Adrian Wheeler for fall 2017. For my project, I decided to present on CitiBike. So why CitiBike? Back when I was in Taiwan, everywhere I turned, I saw public bikes, and I was very glad that when I came back to New York, I began to see public shared bikes being implemented in the city as well. I personally think biking is faster, more environmentally friendly, and it's faster than taking the car and sometimes even the subway, especially here in New York City. So with a quick search, I was able to locate the CitiBike New York City Open data, and here you see that we have access to a lot of the previous months. So I decided to download the data from January all the way to September and place it all into this one big worksheet. So this table is extremely large and has up to 220,530 rows. All this data, yet we still can't find too much information from it. So to help us out, I imported it into Power Pivot, from where most of my pivot tables and charts will come out of. So before I begin to explain what I did with all this data, I created my own scenario as to why I do this project. So everywhere we turn nowadays, you will see advertisements. So I was imagining if an advertising agency came to me asking for advice on where and when and how to advertise to CitiBike customers. And using all this data, I can give them several suggestions. To start off, I created pivot tables to pull out certain pieces of information from all that raw data. Here we have general customer demographics. Over here we can see how there are a lot more subscribers and customers, almost 10 times. Also you can see that males typically make up most of the customer demographics, and here we can, with the help of the conditional formatting, we can see the general much clearly the general age distribution for CitiBike users. In this section, we can see the weekdays, times, and months that the users are generally riding. By inserting a sparkline, we can see how the number of rides increase from Sunday, but then drop off by Friday. Once again, the data bars here are very useful in presenting the quantity of users more clearly. Lastly, I was wondering which locations are better suited if we were to place up advertisements. And here we have the top locations that have the most users going to it. Using VLOOKUP, I was able to match the stations with the latitude and longitude. But having so many stations isn't very helpful, so here I inserted a macro to help make things simpler. Now, this shows the top 10 stations with the most users. So pivot tables are great, but they can only go so far. So I used the data from these pivot tables to create pivot charts. And from these pivot charts, I decided to ask a couple questions. So, what is a typical customer like? Looking over here, the general distribution is mainly male. As in this line graph, we can see that the majority of customers tend to be in their late 20s, early 30s. Most of them are subscribers, and going by how this chart looks like and how most people tend to use CitiBikes during rush hour, perhaps they're working folks. Now, I was wondering what times are best to reach the younger population. So I define younger population as a population under the age of 35. Over here, we can see once again that the best times to reach them are during rush hours from 8 to 9 and from 6 to 7 p.m. There's a bit more females compared to males, but if we were to come up with a marketing strategy for this age group, we would still mainly be targeting males during the rush hour times from 8 to 9 and 6 to 7 p.m. So what days are best to advertise, I was wondering. Going by customers throughout the week, by selecting all the options within the slicer, we can see that Wednesday tends to have the most business. So if we only had 1 week to advertise, I would choose Wednesday. I was also wondering, how do weekends compare with weekdays? Is there any difference? By selecting the two options over here, Saturday and Sunday from this slicer, we can see that there is a very big difference. Instead of having 2 spikes during rush hour, the number of customers is relatively stable throughout the day. And over here, although it may not be very evident, the customer to subscriber ratio has increased. Instead of 1%, there is now 3%. And everything else appears to be equal. I would prefer to advertise on a Saturday instead of a Sunday though. Lastly, I was wondering, do months of the year affect ridership? By once again selecting everything within the slicers, we can see that yes, this chart does say that the months of the year affect ridership quite significantly. From January to March, we have very low ridership rate, but it continues to ride as the year goes by. And finally, in August, there's finally been a drop in the ridership, and I would assume that's because of the cold weather. So it would be best to have a marketing campaign throughout the early to mid of the summer. So, recall that we touched upon earlier the top 10 most busy stations. That is very helpful, but it's not very useful if you have no idea where those stations are. Excel has a very powerful tool called Power Map, and that will be very useful in giving us a better view of where these stations are. So as you can see, the data provided by the website is quite limited and mainly centralized on New Jersey. These bars show the number of rides that are generally being used, and there's a one big one here. And now we have these green bars indicate the trip duration of the bikes that left the station. As you can see, the stations around the water edge tend to be longer, and that will be a good indicator of how many people like to bike around the boardwalk. There's a big tall block in the middle, and that is, I was wondering why, and I did some research, and this area is the historic downtown of New Jersey. It's very scenic, and it also has the Newport Avenue pedestrian plaza, which is a great place to bike and see a lot of shops. I noticed this one bar over here, which I did some research, wondering why this bar tends to be a lot taller than the ones around it. And this bar is actually really near the Path train station. So the Path train station is where many people out of the city tend to travel through, and those that exit the Path station can then just bike to wherever they need to go. So overall, this project has been a lot of fun. It's been really enlightening seeing how Excel is more than just a data analytics tool, but it can also be a great presentation tool. I used to only think that PowerPoint can make presentations, but this is also still very visually appealing and informative. The Power Map was also extremely helpful. I had no idea where those longitude and latitude coordinates were leading, but Power Map was able to display that very well. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you very much.